Good morning. As you know, with anything, there's always a disclaimer as far as getting information out, so that's why I put this here, that this is to be used solely for you folks for the workshop series. Today is November 10. For those of you who are not here, we're going to be viewing it online. You have until November 24 to access all the PowerPoints and the workshops. After November 24, they'll be taken off the site. This way, we'll have information for next year for people who might be interested. We're not just going to leave them there. Same thing for your CEU applications. You have until November 24 to get them to me in a self-addressed stamped envelope so I can go through and then sign them and return them back to you. I cannot submit your CEU applications. I'm going to sign it and send it back to you so you folks can go through and take it and send it in. But that's only until the 24th. I can't let this go on for months and months and months. So I'm just making sure everybody's aware of what the timelines are. So this workshop, for some of you who have been here and have accessed all of them, some of this might be a little repetitive because I teach a couple of courses here on campus. And the information I give you in the 9 C's is through different articles I've read over the years and talking about some things that you can pull together. So when I was hired 10 years ago for this position, one of the things that got me the job was one of the instructors heard me talk about what was then the 5 C's, which is now the 9 C's. And he said, wait a minute, can you repeat that? And wrote it down because he felt there was some basis to what I was talking about. This is called the 9 C's, but it's for working with children of any age. This isn't just for preschool or elementary. This works for junior high, high school, college. I do it with my students. My wife does it to me. And we all need those reminders. So this is the 9 C's to working with children of any age. Am I speaking too fast for those of you who are here? Being French, I have a tendency to do that. All right. The 9 C's. Clear. And I'll go through all of these. You don't have to write it because this PowerPoint will be sent to you unless you do want to write things down. Clear, calm, concise, consistent, caring, choices and consequences, those go together, communication, and changes. Changes is more for the home, and I'll explain all of these. And then we've got an extra one. So already I'm going through and updating it. Clear, natural language. We know we're talking to people. We know inside our minds, we know what it is we want to say, but is what we're saying what we really mean to be saying? Do you ever stop and think about or listen to yourselves? All right? Parents do this a lot. One of my jobs over in my career is working in homes with children and families who have different behavior disorders, ODD, ADHD, Asperger's, autism, different things. And I'll go in and I have to go through and make an assessment. Well, I don't like to be assessed on my program in a 20-minute period, so I go in and I spend some time working with the family, see them in their natural environment. And then I listen to what's going on in the home. Then I have a chance to come back with some actual information. But I hear parents a lot of times talking to their children, and they're asking them, can you get ready for supper? Can you go wash your hands? Can you go pick up your room? Now, we all know that most children know very well that you mean to say, please pick up your toys, please go wash your hands. But there are some children who really catch on to it very quickly, and those are the children who might give you that run-free money, and they realize, you asked me if I can pick up my toys. I don't want to. I can, but I don't want to. Actually, I gave a lecture at the community college about a month ago, and the instructor there, her granddaughter, was talking to her mom. And the mom said, can you pick up the toys, we can get ready for dinner? And she goes, well, Mom, if you're asking me, I won't, but if you're telling me, I will. 4-year-old knew the difference right then and there. All right? So we have to be aware of, when we're talking to someone, did I really say what I meant to say? How are they understanding it? Because if you say, can you pick up your room, and they say, no, I don't want to, and you get into a fight with them, well, really, what's going on here? Whose fault is it? The child who didn't understand what you meant, or you who didn't phrase it correctly? So we have to stop and say, okay, if it's not a choice, don't phrase it as such. All right? Because if you phrase it as such and they give you the negative response and you try pushing it, it's going to be a power struggle. And I'm not exaggerating. I will try not to exaggerate. I've worked with teachers who have gotten into a power struggle with a 3-year-old. Because the 3-year-old is saying, I don't want to. Because they phrase it as such. They phrase it as a choice. So if there is no choice, don't phrase it as such. Right? If there is a choice, phrase it as a choice. Do you want macaroni and cheese, or do you want a peanut butter sandwich? Phrase it. If there's a choice, go ahead and do it. If there isn't, don't phrase it that way. Make sure your language is clear coming out. Now, how do we know if our language is clear coming out? Well, if you get a partner in the house or another adult in the house, and they come to you and say, and they offer you a few little pointers, don't get frustrated at that. We all need to have those reminders, right? I do this training with all my teachers who come in. I get 75 different teachers that I work with in a given year. I go through this with them, and typically at the end of their first day, they'll say, I see what you mean. Because they're realizing how they're phrasing it. Don't say, it's time to go pick up your room, okay? Because that okay that you just tacked on now makes it seem like there is a choice, right? Now, listen to the people you work with. Listen to your friends who are not even in the field. Listen to other parents. Everybody does it, right? We just need to get into that. The okay refers to a choice, and now you're confusing someone, right? Now, I haven't researched this, but I've been doing this for a long time. When I first started, about 1 out of every 20 children would give me a hard time if I phrased it inaccurately. Again, I have to be aware of how I'm doing it. Now it seems like it's 10 or 15% of kids that are doing it. Right? I don't have statistics on it because it's just observational. Why? I have some ideas on that. How many of you are stressed because of what's going on in the world? Right? Just look at the economy for yourselves as adults, not to mention your programs. A little stress for some people. Look at now your programs who don't have full numbers. Another stressor for you. Look at the price of gas. Look at the price of food. If those of you who have your children come and you feed them snacks or meals, look how much that bill has gone up in the past year. Right? Look at all your families who are a little bit behind in their payments because mom's hours got cut. In today's paper they're talking about now, a lot of low-wage positions in companies are going to be brought to under 30 hours a week. Instead of 40, they're going to be down to under 30 because this way they can get around the Affordable Health Care Act as far as paying insurance on it. So how many of your parents are going to be affected by that, which means now they're going to be a little bit behind. Right? And you know as well as I do, the more you let them get behind, the harder it is to catch up. So now they're stressed because of that. What happens sometimes when we get stressed? We don't handle things as well as we typically do. So parents are getting more stressed, they're getting more frustrated with their kids, they're not phrasing it correctly, the child is balking because of what they heard, and parents are reacting to that. So that's another one of the seeds we've been dealing with. So kids are left to their own devices sometimes. Parents are appeasing their children versus working with them. It's a whole lot easier to let the child do something sometimes than to have to deal with it. If you're stressed, you really want to be handling that one. Right? So kids are getting more time on their own. They're not getting as much structure and guidance. If you folks in your programs have had to make cutbacks in your programs, you may not be offering what you were offering 2 years ago. So I'm seeing now that kids are getting a little more obstinate and they're trying to get away with things. So we've got to be careful. So we need to make sure our language is clear. Now, kids are very visual. I use my fingers sometimes when I'm doing things. Right? Do you want to do this one or do you want to do this? Especially for a child who's not answering me. I'll do it. You have two choices. You can do this one right here or you can do this one right here. And you have to give them a chance to make a choice. How long do you give them? For you, it seems like an eternity. 3 or 4 seconds is not a long. If they don't answer, okay, we're going to do this again. You have this choice or this choice. You know this is the one they don't want to do. Yeah. Right? So if you don't answer me, I'm going to choose this one. And what do? Most of the time, they'll grab your finger and say, okay, I want to do that one. Very good. You help guide them. Children don't understand choices which will come up. We need to help them with that, and sometimes it's very visual. With kids sometimes, I'll go through, when working in the home, I remember one little boy that I worked with, when you put him in timeout, he went into his room, and he went into the room afterward, it was a mess. Finger thrown all over the place, the door was kicked, the yelling, all of this stuff. And so I'll do with the child. You need to be in timeout for this long. Now, if you're hitting, kicking, scratching, throwing things, biting, yelling, it's going to be this long. Which one's better? Being in timeout for this long, or being in timeout this long? Once they get familiar with it, they'll actually take my hands and push them together and say, I only want to be that long. Good, what do you need to do? And they'll tell me what it is they need to do. But it doesn't start right away. Shakespeare had it right. Typically on the 3rd time you do it, they know that you're serious about what you're going to do and you're going to follow along. Right? First time you explain it to them. If they do it again, explain to them what they need to do and what will happen if it happens again. You can't give someone a discipline if they don't know what the consequence is going to be, which we'll talk about later. And if they do it again, you have to put it into play. This is an example I give at school. We have a train table. I'm going to use this example. Children are playing with the trains. If a child takes a train and throws it, well, these are the little Thomas ones. It has some weight to them. So if they hit someone, it's going to hurt. If they hit the windows, there's a potential for danger here. So I explain to them what it is they need to do, how to use them. I back off, let them have a chance. They're either going to play with it nicely, they're going to go play someplace else, or they might throw it again. If they throw it again, I have to come in and explain what needs to happen, how to play with it. But if you throw it away, throw it again, I'm going to have you go play with something else. I don't go into timeout a lot. Thankfully, for whatever reason, we don't have to use it a lot. But I'll have them go play someplace else. So then I give them that opportunity. Again, one of the things that's going to happen, they're going to play with it nicely, they're going to leave on their own, or they're going to throw it again. If they throw it again, I have to step in and put into action what I said. So I need to be careful that my consequence is appropriate for them and what it is they're doing. I have to go into play. They're either going to go with me, or they're going to fight it. If they fight it and I give in, it's a wasted breath. They're going to keep on doing that, not just there, but in any other thing that I say that I'm not going to follow through. So if you're going to say you're going to do something, you have to follow through. But you have to be clear on it. Not what you think is about what you actually said. They need to understand it. So for me, that seems to work. Now, if I ask you how many grains of rice will fill this room, anybody want to guess? Millions. All right, I wish I had that in money. All right, if I tell you 1 square foot from floor to ceiling is 1,000,000 grains of rice, now can you go through and give me an idea? Sure you can. You can take the measurements, multiply them together, multiply by 1,000,000 grains of rice. You can give me some idea, because now you have a frame of reference. Kids need to have that too. They need the frame of reference. Again, using the hands, because they're very visual learners. Make sure you're being clear to them. For me, with my kids, and even my 13 and 16-year-olds, it still works. My wife does it with me too. So clear. Now, if you haven't been clear and the child is giving you a hard time, you need to stay calm. Because if you get frustrated and they get frustrated and you get more frustrated and they get more frustrated, where does it end? In your programs, you know you can't hit, you can't swear, you can't yell at them. You can make sure your voice is firm so they understand what's going on. But none of this. Parents at home, do we know if they're yelling, hitting, swearing, any of this stuff? So we need to remain calm. Because if you don't, where does it end? Do you really want to be that guy right there? All right? Or parents will say, Frank, there's no TV for a month. How many parents are going to actually shut off the TV for a month as a punishment? All right? Grounded for a week. Really? No, go to Grandma and Grandpa's house, and now you're hurting Grandma and Grandpa. Is it their fault? All right? No, go into the mall. Well, if you're going to get some shopping stuff done, again, you have to be careful. Who are you hurting at those points? But you have to be careful that when you get frustrated that you're being appropriate with them. Now, if you stop right now and look at everybody around you, nobody's wearing a halo. None of us are perfect. When you realize you said something like this, go back and apologize. Correct it, which we'll talk about. Right? Because in the end, who are you hurting when you do things like that? Right? Is that what you really want in your programs? Or for parents at home? My parents at my program have asked me to do a workshop. This presentation here is what I'm going to do in my workshop. What have you gained if your child now doesn't trust you and is afraid of you? Either in your program or in your home. So we have to be careful what it is we're doing. We know we need to instruct them, but at what cost? So we need to keep those things in mind. So stay calm, right? No, that's not my wife, right? Make it reasonable. Whatever that content of that discipline can make it reasonable, make it appropriate, right? What's the generally accepted rule of thumb for timeout? How long? 1 minute for every year they're alive, all right? But if you've got a child who's sitting down quietly after 20 seconds, he's a 4-year-old, do you really need to make them sit there for 4 minutes? The point is you've gotten them to calm down. Now, for me, when I put a child in timeout, I tell them why. They go sit there. And again, if after 20 seconds they've calmed down, I'm not going to wait 4 minutes. I'll go to them and say, why are you here? Don't just let them get up. Have they learned anything? Why are you here? They might be able to respond, they might not. If they can, we'll work on it together. If they can't, I'll explain again why they are there and what will happen if they do it again, because you know what's going to happen again. Set the stage for next time. Then, when I'm all done, I ask them if I can have a hug. Because I want them to know that I don't like what you did, but I still like you. Now, they're either going to give you a hug or they're not. I've had teachers get very frustrated when a child says, no, I don't want to give you a hug. They take it personally. Back off, folks. Right? It's the child's body. You need to give that opportunity, which we'll talk about again later. All right? Make the punishment soon after it arrives. And don't say, wait till your father, oh, I'm going to tell your parents and you're going to get punished at home. Sorry, school is school, home is home. Do you want to be the punisher for what happens at home? I sure don't. There's a clear distinction there. So make it appropriate, make it soon after it arises in your program. Some people have to use charts for some children. I'm seeing some people get a little chilly. If you're chilly, anybody can just get up and shut those windows. Right? Because I can feel the coolness coming up here, so you guys in back might be getting a little cold. Don't hesitate to shut those. If you're using a chart, and if you do this, you're going to get a sticker, meaning a negative. And if you get 4 stickers, well, once they reach that fourth sticker by 10 o'clock, what incentive is there for them to be good for the rest of the day? I've already blown it. Right? Can they earn back their freedom? Is there a chance for them to have one of those stickers removed? Right? They need to understand, we need to be clear on it. Right? Because we have to realize, what are we trying to teach them? Are you there to make your day easier? Or are you there to help them as they're growing? Right? I like to work with wood. I can go and build something really quickly in a couple of hours. There's my sense of satisfaction. It doesn't take a couple of hours to get a child to go from left to right. It takes a lot of days, sometimes a lot of months. So we have to be careful. What we're trying to teach them may not happen right away. So we do need to remain calm. Right? Who wants to be the perfect parent? Right? I had a dad in my office a few years ago. Mama just had a second child, and he's in my office, and he's really sneezing, and he's trying to be the perfect parent. And I said, if you're trying to be the perfect parent, you failed. But if you're trying to be a good parent, you're already succeeding because he was concerned about what he was doing. We need to tell people, you're not going to be the perfect parent. Because if you're the perfect parent, I want you coming into my program. Right? And if you're the perfect parent, I want to see what your child is like. No child is perfect. How can we expect a parent to be perfect? So take that off the table for some of our parents. Right? So again, staying calm. Trying to make them say you're sorry. Right? Can't reach inside of you and pull it out from you. Right? This is where you really get parent versus child and teacher versus child. Right? Yesterday I was going to my office, and one little boy had built a nice tower of blocks. And another little boy came over in play and just knocked them all down. Had a great time with it. Well, the kid who built it wasn't too happy with it. I didn't take over because I got my students. That's what they're there for. One of the students said, okay. And they worked together and they built another tower. They didn't even get into the whole sorry thing. They worked together on building another tower. Right? Saying sorry is not all what we need to do. So I'm going to do this one. Johnny looks at his sister and says, you're ugly. So the girl went to her mom and said, Johnny said I'm ugly. Mom went to the boy and said, Johnny, go tell your sister you're sorry. I don't want to. Go tell your sister you're sorry. I don't want to. Go tell your sister you're sorry. Okay. Johnny goes up to his sister and he says, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're ugly. Did that make any sense for a little girl? No, right? You can't make them say they're sorry. And if you're going to get, I'm sorry. That doesn't do any good. Finding a way around that. They found a way around it by building the tower again together. That took care of it, and they explained it. No sorry going involved. Not always having to say you're sorry, right? And they don't learn that in a vacuum. We need to be modeling that. We need to, when we make a mistake, when we say, oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart, I didn't mean to do. They need to learn some of that. Parents need to realize they are role models for their children. So we need to explain to them that you can be doing some of that modeling. But we have to be really careful on how much this sorry needs to come out. Doesn't mean we give them a pass on everything. Don't misunderstand me. But what are we trying to get from them? Right? I tried to focus this on. Clear, calm, concise. When I meet with my parents and my teachers, I tell them, do not memorize this. There's too much information. You will not get all of it. Listen to it, let it wash over you, and it'll make sense as a whole. So we need to be careful that when we're talking to the children that we're not lecturing them and going on too long, because you're going to start losing them. They're going to get glassy-eyed, right? They're going to be looking around, they just want to get away from you, right? They will not remember anything you say if you go on too long, right? Have you ever stopped to listen to yourself when you're starting to do that? Right? And if you're having a fight with someone and they start to lecture you, are you going to be listening to them when they're lecturing you when you're in the throes of an argument? Not going to happen. So we need to remember, when we're trying to give important information out to people, do it at a neutral time. In an argument, it's not going to happen. They're not going to listen to you. Even if you are 100% spot on correct, they're going to refuse to listen to you. To do it in a neutral time. Also called the recency-latency effect. What I tell you in the beginning, if I go through and try to give you 9 words that I want you to memorize, and I wait 3 seconds between each word, when I say the first word, you can keep it in you, you can practice it.
The second word, you're going to do the first one and the second one. Third word, you're going to try hard first, second, and third word. By the time I start getting to the fourth and fifth ones, you're going to start forgetting what the first and seconds are. When I get to the sixth and seventh, you're going to forget the middle ones. You're going to start going back to remember the first ones. When I get to the last words, you're going to remember the first ones and the last ones. You're going to forget everything in between. Recency, latency effect. So shorten those speeches that you're giving to the kids. Get that information out. And you know as well as I do, they're not going to catch it the first time. Sometimes you need to have those repeating lessons for the kids. That's why I use all sorts of books with them to remind them about it. Right? But when you're doing this, what are you trying to impart? If you're going on and on and on, I may not even catch the important piece you're trying to get to. So, get the important part. Do they get it? How do you know they understand what you meant? One, you might see it by their actions they're going to do after. Some people might be able to go through and reiterate it to you, repeat it to you. But you need to find out, is it getting through? So ask them to repeat it. Help them, if they've got some of it, help them with all of it to get through. Make sure the main point is taken care of. So, shorten it. Go over it with them, and there's nothing wrong with doing it as a group sometimes too, because then everybody's hearing it, and they'll start practicing it amongst themselves. All right? Clear, calm, concise, consistent. All the adults need to be consistent on things. If mom is dad is the one who's the very hard on everyone, mom is always saying yes, who are they going to go to? They're always going to go to the weakest link. All right? So moms and dads need to be as close as they can on what's going on. Staff need to be as close as they can to what's going on. Sorry, camera people. Need to be as close as they can to what's going on. Otherwise, the children will be confused. All right? So you need to be going through as consistent as possible. Try to work out that weakest link. Try to come to a happy medium. You will never get parents who agree eye to eye on everything. It's not going to happen. You'll never get staff who agree eye to eye on everything. Let's throw this one out. Do you think kids should be able to bring toy guns to school? No. Don't answer that to me. Just think about it yourselves. If they can't do that, why are we allowed to bring Barbie? Is Barbie a good role model for everyone? Right? So see right away, I've seen people shaking their heads yes and no and up and down. Right? You need to come to a happy medium on things. But don't argue or discuss it in front of the kids. My son is upstairs, and I'm talking in the kitchen, and he hears his name more those years, and he's 16. When he was a kid, he could hear everything that's going on. Right? Make sure they're actually asleep if you're going to talk about it at home. Or go for a walk. If your kids are old enough or if you've got a babysitter, I'll work indoor play. Talk about it when the kids are not there. Because if they hear who the dissenter is, they'll always go for the one who is the weakest link. So parents need to be as close as they can on what's going on. But grandma and grandpa have to follow too. And it's a harder one. Right? Because grandma will say, but it's my job to spoil them. No, it's not. If you're going to spoil them, you're going to see them. So grandma and grandpa have to agree. The teachers and parents have to have some idea of what's going on to coordinate things. If at home they're allowed to do whatever they want, and at school they're not, it's hard for the kids. So programs have to be as close as they can with the parents. You're always going to be that way? Nope. But you have to try and come to some agreement. If you get two bosses, who do you follow? Now, Rachel, my student right here in the camera, has two bosses. There are two bosses. On one day she'll open with me, on one day she'll open with another teacher. If with me she has to be there right at this time, another teacher, well, as long as you get here by this time, she might try flowing that one over to me. We have to be consistent, all right? Same thing for you folks. If you are two teachers in a room, you have to follow the same thing with the kids. Because if you don't, and one of you is sick that day, another person's let them do things more freely or get away with more stuff, it's hard to get back in. It's really hard when you've got separated families or divorced parents. Because they're with mom, typically, Monday through Friday, they go to dad's on the weekends. Right? Dad hasn't seen them very much. Dad wants to do this and do that and do this and do that. So Sunday night, mom gets them back and has to retrain them. That's the stories I've been hearing years and years and years. So moms and dads, especially if they're having a situation like that, really need to try and be consistent on things. Forget the anger towards each other. Think about what you're doing to the kids. Right? So you really have to be following along as much as possible. You need to have structure. Right? What I call it is the umbrella policy. If you get an umbrella that you go outside and it's closed and it's raining, it's not going to help you any. If everybody's got the big golf umbrella, try getting through one of the doors with those big golf umbrellas, walking around on campus. Right? Because you've got a regular umbrella. You stick your arm out, you get wet. Put your arm back in, you stay dry. That's what I have. I have an open umbrella policy. It's not so restrictive that you can't do anything, but it's not so open that you don't know what the ends are. The kids need to know what your structure is, but so do the parents. When they come in, if they're coming to your program, want to be involved. They need to know what you folks say is okay and not okay. Right? So they need to know what your structure is. I just like to have an open policy, an open umbrella, but not so free. Then, what are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? Right? Sometimes your goal may actually harm someone. Inadvertently, of course. Is your goal there to teach them? And again, what are you there to teach? Are you there to teach ABC 1, 2, 3? We talked about it before. Social skills, getting along with people, controlling your own impulses. Kids need to learn that very much. So we're what are we there to teach? Are you there to avoid repetition? Do you want the kids to stop doing that action over and over and over again? That's part of teaching. Into discipline. People sometimes do not like discipline because they say it's a four-letter word. No. We all have consequences, which we'll go over. There's nothing wrong with discipline that's appropriate. All right? Sorry, back 30, 40 years ago, the belt, the boot, no, that's not appropriate. But we've already talked about timeout. We've already talked about having kids being able to move away from things if they're not following along well. We all have rules. You guys have rules. You have parents coming to your program. You probably open at 6:30, 7 o'clock. Right? So if you're supposed to be there at 6:30 and you get parents waiting and you show up at 7 o'clock, not going to be very good, is it? You may lose some of your clientele, or you may be in the boss's office by 9 o'clock. Right? So we all have an expectation. We all have to be consistent with what we're doing. If there are changes, you can go through and change it, but make sure everybody knows what's going on. Okay. Do you care about your kids? Don't answer that to me. Think about it. Do you really care about your kids? And what does caring mean? Does caring mean letting them do what they want? Does caring mean following too rigid a structure? Does caring mean, oh, you have to always fuss over them? I have a teacher who came and said, oh, I just love working with kids. I think they're so cute. Probably not the one I really want to have in the program. All right? So you have to care, of course. But do the kids know you care? I think some teachers where the structure is very rigid and there's no time to actually stop and smile at the kids. Right? They need to know that you care. And how do they know that you care? Everybody's different on what they feel is appropriate. For my school, only because of, especially as a male in the field, if you look around, there's no men here. As a male in the field back in the late 80s, 70s, early 80s, or late 80s, early 90s, a lot of child abuse cases, a lot of perpetuated by men. Rules had to be put in place, all right? But are we going to raise a generation of kids where that's okay, where it's hands off? Because those are the kids who will not know how to deal with anybody, right? So if a child, I tell my teachers, if a child needs a hug, give them a hug. No more, no less. Right? Male or female, doesn't matter. Give them a hug, all right? If that's what they're feeling that they need. But in my school, because of the way we do it, the golden rule is never one teacher left alone with the child. That's how we do it. I know there are programs where there is only one teacher in the room. Your programs have to be set up the way. You have to have some safeguards in place. But for us, never one teacher left alone. Even when my daughter came to the program, I did not take her to my office by myself because it set a bad example. Right? So that's how we do it. You have to find out your structures, how you're going to do that. So you don't have someone looking at you saying, I noticed you giving a hug. What was that all about? Right? They need to be able to trust you. Right? And sometimes little touches mean a whole lot more than just going overboard with them. Sometimes just sitting next to them. Sometimes just having to sit in your lap for a bit. Sometimes just putting your arm on their shoulder and saying, I like that picture. Right? You know, the old thing of, tussling the boy's hair. Yeah, you know what? Some kids realize that that's all they need to know that you made a connection with them. So they need to know that you care. Just be careful that someone's not going to misinterpret that. And trust me, it does happen. And once they've got that misinterpretation, it's hard to overcome it. So again, get down on their level. See what it's like from their point of view. Show them with your face and the tone of your voice. Don't use bribery. I did teachers before we used bribery to get kids to like them. Sorry, not going to happen. Right? And again, the simple touch, and as I put the asterisks, is to make sure that no one's going to misinterpret those touches. All right? Just be careful for yourselves. So caring, again, part is your staffing. I know for my staffing, that's my rule that I have. I have to follow just like everybody else. You have to figure out your own rules for your programs. Every program is going to be different. Hugs and kisses policy. If you don't have one, you really need to. We have observation booths. So parents can sit and see what's going on. Not a problem. I tell my teachers, don't worry about it. They're not there to spy on us. They want to see what their kids are doing. All right? For here, at my school, this is the policy we have. If a child needs a hug, they're having a hard time saying bye to mom and dad, or they just got bumped, or someone took their toy and they need a hug, give them a hug. Right? And I talk about it to the kids this way as far as hugs and kisses. Because they like to give hugs and kisses to their friends. And so I break it down. If you want to give a hug to someone, that's okay. But you need to ask them first. It's their body. If they don't want you to give them a hug, it doesn't mean they don't like you. It just means they don't want a hug from you right then. Little boys need to learn that early too. Same thing with kisses. You want to give someone a kiss, that's great. But you need to ask them. They might not want to kiss. And if they don't want a kiss from you, it doesn't mean they don't like you. It just means they don't want a kiss from you right now. But if they do say you can give them a kiss on the cheek. And then we talk about germs. Right? So we explain it to them, not just once, of course, because it takes repetition on this. So you have to figure out your policy there from the kids to the kids and the kids to the staff. Same thing. Children like to give hugs, folks. All right? And if you're not letting them, you're diminishing some of their growth. But you have to have parameters on it. All right? In favoritism. When I first started in the field 100 years ago, I was told you cannot have favorites. Now, don't answer this. Do you have favorites? Have you had favorites over the years? In my opinion, if you don't have a favorite, or you don't have favorites over the years, you've probably not made a good connection to some of these kids. I can tell you some kids that I remember from 28 years ago. Right? You're going to have favorites, but if you show it, that's the problem. Right? You're going to have parents you're going to connect with better than others. For whatever reason, they're more similar age, they like to do skiing like you do, whatever. Be careful that those lines don't get blurred. Right? Staffing needs to be aware of the whole YouTube, the social media, all of this stuff. Staff taking out their camera, taking pictures of the kid. I'm going to post this later on. You got to have permission and all of this stuff, folks. All right? So your staff need to know what your rules are. So you need to have those in place. You need to make sure they're avoiding favoritism. All right? Same thing if you've got lots of staff in your program. Do you know all your staff as well? Do you know all of them very, very well? Do you want to hang around with them all? No, they're going to be different things. All right? Unless, of course, there's only two in the program. Or if you're the only staff person and you don't like yourself, you got a problem. Right? But the point is, you have to be careful that you're not going to show favoritism. I mean, I've got right now 25 students I see every week. All right? There are some students I'm going to get to know better than others. Be because I work with them more, or it's their second or third year working with me, or they come from my hometown, or they speak for, or whatever. I have to be careful to avoid favoritism. For me with my classes, when they give me their papers, their names have to be on the back covers. When I read their papers, I'm reading the content. I grade all the papers, then I find out who wrote them. So no one can ever say, oh, you like them better than you like me, or you gave the guys better grades than you gave the girls. No. So we have our own ways of going through to avoid favoritism. Check your programs to make sure that's happening for you folks. You don't want to get caught behind the 8 ball on that one. Clear, calm, concise, consistent, caring, choices and consequences. Right? They go together. Do they have choices? Of course, everybody makes choices all the time. You chose to come here or not. You chose to come here one time. You're going to choose what you can do for lunch. The kids make choices all the time. They don't realize, though, that they're making choices. So you can explain that to them, that we all do make choices. Right? And how do we know when kids are able to accurately or effectively make these choices? Well, if you get a kid who's walking around all the time knocking down all the blocks, he or she needs to understand what's happening, those effects that they're doing. Right? Don't say, well, at 3 years old they're going to learn that. No, they can start learning it as infants. Right? You get an infant and you're holding them. Man, it feels so good sometimes. Right? Reach up and touch. I'm sorry, I'm going soft for the camera, forget. And they reach up and they're touching your face and it's just so soft and you can smell the baby powder and all of this stuff. And then they start grabbing your earrings and pulling them. Right? You don't let them keep pulling your earrings. You tell, nope, that's not what we do. You start explaining things to them. By 2 years old, the touch is not so soft. By 3-year-olds, or right? You don't allow them to keep doing that. You explain it to them. Kids need to know that. That's all part of learning what choices are. Right? Explain it to them. Give them some of that. Sometimes use it not just as, oh, this is what you did. Sit down and talk about choices. Right? There are lots of books you can use on things. And I like to use logic. Right? Some people say, well, kids don't understand that. Sure they do. At 2.5 years old, it's amazing how much children can use logic on some of the stuff they're doing and starting to make those choices. Right? What if they made the wrong choice? Can they go back and change things? Sure. Give them some of that opportunity. But, example, in your own homes, you ask your children, do you want macaroni and cheese or peanut butter and jelly? I want peanut butter and jelly. So you make the peanut butter and jelly, you put it, oh no, I wanted macaroni. Right? again, I have 14 siblings. My mom said, this isn't a restaurant. Right? This is the meal. If you don't like it, that's where it is. Right? And if you want dessert, this is the way my mom did it. If you want dessert, you have to finish your plate and turn it over. So now the dessert goes on the bottom side of your plate. Right? So this way she knew we were getting the good meal before we got dessert. And then there was less dishes to wash because there was no dishwasher. Right? So if they make a choice, are they stuck with it? Again, you have to look at what it is that's going on. If you make a choice, do you like to be stuck with it? Right? There are contracts that are made, you've got 3 days to change your mind. Right? We have made those choices. We don't like to be stuck. Give them that opportunity. Because we're supposed to be teaching them, not just ABC 1, 2, 3, but how to do things. Right? So they're making choices, so does that lead to consequences? Sure does. Right? You buy the car because you get to that dealership. My wife just bought a new car. So I do the legwork for it, and she narrows it down, and I do the numbers parts of things. Right? But we tested a lot of cars, and she found a car she really liked. Right? So we get out, the guy was driving, was in the back seat because it's a hybrid, there's all these technical things you need to, he's showing us some of the stuff, we did a test drive. So he went in, and my wife said, do you like the car? And she said, I really like this car. I said, don't show it. Don't smile. Because if they see you smiling coming in, they've got you. All right? There are consequences. If she had gone in smiling, we'd have never gotten the deal we got, and we got a good deal. So we have to go through. There are consequences to everything. If you're late to work, there's consequences. If you don't have the right attitude at work, there are consequences. If you're not handling things well in your program, there are consequences. If you're using a louder voice or wrong terminology, there's a consequence. If you have inappropriate clothing, yeah. I work with a lot of female students. There's some inappropriate clothing, or some of the guys come in with the double entendres on the t-shirts. Not going to happen. Right? Got to be very careful. So we all have consequences. But if a teacher, one of my students comes in with inappropriate clothing, and I fire them, or for whatever reason, or something like that as an extreme, if they haven't been told what the dress policy is, then I'm wrong in the consequence because I haven't informed them what's going to happen. So you need to give kids what's okay, what's not okay, what will happen. Right? We have to do that. So we've learned about consequences, but it took us time. Have any of you ever made a choice that you wish you could go back and change? And I'm not talking about your husbands. We all have learned consequences. That's part of growing. I think that's part of what we teach the kids too. This is part of growing up. You can't start right off with consequences. I know for me, I have a lot of kids because we do the academic year. So in September, I have a lot of new kids coming in. I can't on the first day start putting the consequences in. So for us, the first 2 weeks, because of our timetable, that's the whole learning curve. The whole 2 weeks is explaining what's going on, how we do things, giving them that 5-minute warning that we're going to be switching structure. Give them that. So you can't start right off the consequences. You need to establish that routine. They need to know what's okay, what's not okay. We need to make sure we're doing things age appropriately. I told someone before, I had a little girl that I was meeting with the parents, and I said, by 4 years old, she really should be able to sit in a chair without squirming around all the time. Mom looked at me and she said, she just turned 3. And I said, never mind. Right? I was inappropriate. I need to make sure that what I'm doing is appropriate for the age of what I'm working with. Right? But if I get a child in my school who can sit at the table and have snack and lunch with the kids, and at home they're running around all over the place, I don't have magic fairy dust. If they can do it at my school, they should be able to do it at home. So we need to work with home. Right? But we need to make sure we're being clear. Remember that first one? First C was clear. Make sure we're clearly articulating what's going on, what the routine is, and what they need to be doing. Right? Again, consequences. They need to know what the routine and expectations are. Age of the child into account. I have 2.5 to 5-year-olds. I have some children who come in who don't speak English in the beginning. Well, obviously my expectations and my consequences are going to be different for a child who doesn't understand what I'm saying compared to a 4-year-old who does speak English and is in here for the 2nd year. I have to make sure that I'm taking all that into account. All right? You need to be clear, consistent, and you need to stay calm. Again. Is that what you want to be? Is that what you want to be? All right? If a child does something wrong, can we show that? Can we show it on our faces we don't like what they did? Sure you can. You need to be careful not going overboard and scaring them, or that the consequence is going to be too harsh. But there's nothing wrong with showing them, I don't like what you did. I like you, but I don't like what you did. and using some terminology with that. But don't say, I don't like what you did, that was not okay. No. They're going on your face and your words. They're not on your tone. They're not listening to anything of those words. All right? So yes, we can show that we're not happy with what they did. Then we need to explain to them what they did was not okay and how to do it differently next time. But we need to make sure we separate the displeasure at their actions and the displeasure at them. I think one of the books in the back on the table is David Goes to School. Right? And you know he's had a hard day. The teacher then says, see you tomorrow, David. He was off skipping because he's coming back tomorrow. Right? You need to make sure at the end of the day, as much as possible with all of your children, that you're not sending them home in a bad mood. Because now you've passed that on to the parents. Just like the parents can't come in, have a hard day, and say, oh, they're all yours now. Because what are you telling that child? What does that child think when they're hearing mom say, oh, they're all yours now? Right? We have to be careful. I feel like I'm preaching, I'm really trying not to be. So consequences, what is your policy? I know my policies at my school, I probably have 8, 10, 12 different programs here. Your center policy. Your center policy and your personal policies. If you can't agree with what the center is doing, you're always going to have a problem with it, and that's not going to work. So you need to make sure that you're either going to bend to that, or you need to be in a different place. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Right? Part of it comes with training. You guys are here for training. Everybody needs to have those trainings. Right? Parents need to have it too, because you know there's parental conflict. They are not always taught on what to do to be a good parent. Right? We're going to train to be work on cars, train to work in carpentry, plumbing. We don't get a lot of parent training. Right? Who do we listen to? Dr. Phil? Right? No. Parents sometimes need to be able to come to you and say, can I ask you a question? Right? Talk to them. You're working with them. Sometimes they need that. I make sure they understand I don't have all the answers. So consequences. Do we need to tell the parent every little thing their child did wrong that day? Because do we tell the parent everything they did that day? Well, if you're not going to tell them everything right they did, you shouldn't be telling them everything wrong they did. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with saying they had an interesting day. We had this and this, but we also did this, this, this. So let them understand that their child, which child is perfect? I've never had a perfect child. My children are perfect. Right? So you have to be really careful on these things. Because imagine you're the parent coming to pick up your child. You just had your day at work, whatever that might be, and you walk into the program, your child is crying, and the teacher says, you would not believe what happened today. All right? So you have to be careful. So what do we tell parents about a child's day? Get to know your parents. Parents are either going to be your greatest asset or your greatest pain in the asset. Right? I like to have my greatest asset. And I didn't realize when I put that slide in it that was there. Right? I was going over it last night and I laughed out loud and said, okay, you got to come see this. I showed my wife. She goes, oh, that's a great picture for that one. Right? But it is. I want my parents on board. That doesn't mean I give them everything they want. That doesn't mean I bend my program to every different parent, because then I'm going to have 20 different programs for 20 different parents. But I want to get to know my parents. So if they've got a question, they don't have to fear coming in. Or if I need to talk to them, they don't have to fear about it. Communication. The director to the staff to the director, because I'm not on the floor all the time. My staff know that if something's going on, good or bad, someone needs to tell me what's going on. Just like if a parent calls in and says, my son's not coming in, or my daughter's not coming in, or they've got a head cold, I need to let that information go through to the parents too. If I get 2 parents calling me and say, we're not coming in because our kids have headlights. I gotta let parents know that one. We're gonna take care of it in the program. All right? So you have to have the communication. Parents need to let you guys know what's going on too. So I tell my staff, if a parent calls in and says, my son's not coming in today, ask them why. You're not trying to be personal, but again, if I get 3 parents calling and they're all got children have flu symptoms, I need to put something out to parents. I need to make sure we're disinfecting all of this. So get that information. Let the parents know that they can come talk to you about things. So you have to have that communication. And again now, from the staff to the children, we need to communicate well with them. We need to make sure we're being clear. Now, I tell my teachers, if you see me doing something, you have the right to come up to me and say, Kevin, why did you do it that way? Are kids allowed to ask you, well, teacher, how come we do it this way? How come we can't? Are they allowed to question you? And then, do you give them answers? Make sure it's appropriate. Right? I'm allowed to question the staff. We need to look at what our rules are in the program. Right? When's the last time you and your program, don't answer this, you and your program staff, when's you looked at your rules or your center policies? I mean, for some programs, they get those rules and policies, put them in a file, and don't look at them again for 6, 7 years. Well, you get different children coming in, different staff that come in. Periodically, you need to take a look at that, those rules, and see how it's impacting your program now. So, make sure you've got that communication. Do you like to hear, can you come into my office? Right? So when you call a parent at work or at home and say, hi, this is Kim from the Child Study Center, the first thing the parent does is think, what went wrong? What happened? Right? That's why I get to have my parents as the greatest asset. So when I call them, or if I say, can I talk to you for a minute, they don't freak out. They don't wonder what happened. It's, I need to talk to you. And when I say come into my office, we might go into the kitchen, we might go into the cover room, we might go into the observation booth. It's rare that anybody actually comes into my office. But they know that if I need to talk to them, we're just going to talk. So if the parent needs to ask us something, we don't have to be wondering when the parent says, can I talk to you a few minutes at the end of the day? And then you start wondering for the whole day, what do they want to talk about? All right? So get that communication going through, folks. Changes. This is one that's really important for families, all right? Because I've worked with families in the homes, and the parents will say, I'm there for a reason. I don't go to a home because everything's going great. I usually have to go to a home because there's something happening. And as I walk in and parents say, oh, this and this and this, we're going to change it, and that's what we need you here for. All right? You can't change everything at the same time. One, the child will not be able to do it. It's just not going to happen. Two, you as a parent, you're not going to be able to do it either. So, find what needs to be made. Again, here, you don't want to be lecturing when there's an argument, right? Find the things that need to be made, what's going to be happening. Is there a need for the change, and who decided the need? How many changes are needed? So this is the example I give. If I get 5 changes, we're going to choose one. The one that's either the most urgent because of a dangerous situation, or the one that we think we need to deal with first. Maybe it's the easiest one. We'll take that one. We'll talk about it. We'll get mom and dad to talk about it and get to a happy medium on it, no weak links. Then we'll make sure that nobody's listening when we're talking. Because the kids don't, we don't want the kids to hear that. Then we'll go through and we'll talk to the kids about it at a neutral time. So you're having snack. You've just come in from playtime and you're putting all your stuff away. We explain it that, okay, starting tomorrow, this is what we're going to do. And you know it's going to take some repetition. You say it again before they go to bed. Then the next day, you go through and you set into play. So you start with one change. So if you start all of them at the same time, it's not going to happen. I know I couldn't do it. If I got home today, my wife said, we're doing this, I'm going to be like, start with one at a time. When to initiate the conversation. Again, at a neutral time. The adults need to be on the same page. Don't do the weak link. You need to be able to follow through. Shakespeare again, 3 times. Typically by the 3rd time of doing it where you're being consistent, they're going to follow through. Right? For your programs, you need to do that as a staff. If just the director decides they're going to make the changes and then tells you what to do, you may not agree with it. So now you have to either live with it or go back to the director who's already felt, well, I've already put all this time into this. So as a group, you need to decide what changes. List them according to importance and necessity. If there's family members, let them know what's going on, or staff about what's happening and why. And again, neutral time. Present all necessary. If you're having a staff, you need to do it. You need to do a staff meeting. You can't do it while you're having a snack with the kids and trying to get the teachers to explain what's going on. You need a staff time. You need to be able to meet with the parents. What's going on? When do you start the change? If I'm going to tell little Johnny that next Saturday we're going to start, that's too far away. Johnny will not remember that by next Saturday. And I keep telling him on Monday and Sunday and Tuesday and Wednesday, it's still too far. So you need to make sure you're doing it when it's going to happen. And make sure that everybody's on board, especially for your program. If you're making changes, and I've been to programs where it seems like every 3 months they're just changing everything around. It's like, okay, that's a little hard for staff and children. Right? But make sure everybody's on board with what's going on. Enforce it, Shakespeare again. When it happened, when it's time, put it into play. And you need to follow through. Because if not, the kids and the staff know they'll just wait you out. Oh, it's not working. I won't do anything to help it. Presume the director's going to say, guys, this isn't working, let's change this. Or the kid will just say, I'll just give them a hard time. At some point, they're going to give in. So you got to put it into play, otherwise they're going to wait you out. Follow the C's. Consistent, calm, caring, and choices. Let them know what's going on. It's like you, no, try not. Do it tonight. There is no try. You've got to do it. If you're just going to say, well, we're going to try this. What's the child going to remember?
We're trying.
Try this. Right? We're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. There is no try. Changes. Once you've got that under control, go to the next one. You can't start that second one if the first one's not into play and doing well. Right? Make certain to congratulate them. That's an extra seat. That's a free. They need to know they're doing a good job. But make sure it's an appropriate congratulations. Oh, that's so wonderful! You did it. No, they don't need that. I really like the way you did a great job with. Make sure it's an appropriate congratulations. All right? But tell parents they don't need to be an American Idol parent. Right? This is the parent who thinks their child can do no wrong. Their child is perfect. This is just an angelic child. They don't see anything wrong with their child, and you're thinking, say what? Right? So we need our parents to realize, don't be an American Idol parent. You've all seen the show. You've all seen the people go on and think they're the greatest singer, and then they're swearing at everybody and doing all of this stuff because they didn't make it. Come on, somebody, by age 18, if you're thinking, I'm the best, I'm the next American Idol, and you can't sing, somebody has misled you along the way. Right? So please, we need to work with our parents and make them realize, don't be an American Idol parent. That's the 10th C that I'm going to be putting in. Gotta have confidentiality. Again, the pictures on YouTube, talking about it when you're going over to the bar later on, you're talking about what's going on, you don't know who's listening, talking about certain parents and forgetting that other people might be around. I know for my students, I tell my students, you may have children of some of your professors. So we've got to maintain a confidentiality. If a parent in the program asks you a question about their child and you think you can answer it, go ahead. If it's something you don't think you should be answering, direct them back to me or my assistant. Right? If a parent asks you a question about a child that's not theirs, the only response is, you need to talk to Kevin or Karen. Right? You have to maintain the confidentiality. So that is one, and some people do not have that confidentiality. So you need to make sure that they are aware of what confidentiality means. Right? The 9 C's plus the confidentiality. It's not an end. It is not the wherewithal. It does not take care of everything. But when you stop and look at it, put it together as a package, it's like, wait a minute. This does seem to work. It helps on a lot of different issues. And it works for different ages, so it's not just for your preschoolers. Right? So it's the 9 C's, throw in the confidentiality one, and you've got a base to work with. I've been doing this over 20 years now, just going through the experience of the articles, the working with people, and for me, it seems to work. It works with my students. My parents ask for it, so that's what I work with for my parents. Are you rich? Right? You need to look at your program rules. We do a photo CD. We take pictures of the kids, parents sign off on it, also saying that they're not allowed to put it on YouTube, because there's a lot of pictures here, but we're also careful that whatever picture we're taking is not inappropriate. If I'm taking a picture of a child who's doing something at the Play-Doh table, I need to be something that's inappropriate there. I have a lot of female staff. I need to make sure that the pictures are being taken of the kids, if there's a staff there, that it's also not inappropriate with some of the clothing people wear. So you've got to be aware of what you're putting on those CDs, because those are, for us, that's our CDs going out to people, right? Those are some of the pictures we do take right there on that poster board. Right? That's my program right there. That's what I wanted to talk about. I've got little things we can talk about, little stories, anecdotes, and things, but it's 11:15. We have a chance for some discussion. So do we want to stop? I can come to this later if we have a downtime and have a chance to discuss it. Do you want me to go over and talk about some of these? This is up to you folks. And Richard, we can stop the tape.
Appreciated. A number of you have come from some distance, so let's see who wins the prize. Portland. Anybody further away?
How long ago did we have to go back? I'm from California.
No, this morning. Well, I got here from California.
Oh my.
So,
your workshop.
Since we're getting to the end of this workshop, we've lightened up the affair to finish with play. And the comment was made earlier, if you don't love your job, you know, and I thought, yeah, that's right. If you're not having fun, that's sort of part of what the preschool education is all about, is having fun. Introducing kids, remember you're introducing kids to school, but also to group life, what it means to be in a group and to participate in a group. And so today's talk is going to be about how this has been going on in the United States from Winslow Homer's time, 1872. Take a good look. Take a good look at what's going on here.
There's only boys. For what?
No, the girls are all.
Oh, they
She's
are.
in
Oh,
she in a
separate.
dress?
Yep.
It's like red rope.
And, you know, you can see this is a highly developed urban center, you know, where crossing the road. No, it's a one-room schoolhouse.
They're all barefoot.
They're all barefoot. They probably just got out of that little box. They needed to.
They all got hats on.
Snap the whip is quite an active game, right? And actually, I overlapped with this generation. We played snap the whip. So I can relate to some of this. Take a good look at that. Here's another one.
Oh my God, it's a stagecoach.
This is from Easton. Is that the band?
Yep.
All right.
It's just
And once again, you can see there are girls here. Where are they? Yeah, there's just a pair of girls up on top. One has an umbrella. And you can see they're having quite a bit of fun while somebody's being dragged off by mom on the far right-hand side. So we're looking at not quite 150 years.
Are they literally right outside?
Right.
They're marching by.
Okay, interrupt your class. I like that if we did a stage touch like that today, we'd have the same reaction.
Oh yeah, we were just talking.
Getting them off.
We're going to hold off for these that get in their afterlife put into a school playground, and they of course elicit quite a lot of imaginative, creative, pretend play, especially with the young ages. You know, to be able to get in a boat, and this is something you're going to see obviously with all the 3 to 5 year olds that you have. They're going to be engaged in this quite a lot. Yep.
You know where I can get an old stagecoach from?
Really? Real one?
Yeah, from my playground. No, do you know where?
Yeah. Well, an old stagecoach today is probably too expensive for a kid.
Yeah.
But not in,
Make one.
in this one, no, not in 1871. So these are 19th century works that take us back to childhood in America at that time, where what you saw in both paintings is an absence of adult structure, which is a key to what we're going to be talking about. You also did not see anybody that would be labeled obese. And they were all engaged in physical activity, creativity and imagination in their play. Both slides, you can see how much contact there was automatically with the natural world, with the forest and the mountains surrounding the one-room schoolhouse. These are American paintings, and they show the influence of American culture. We also, somebody remarked, gender segregation. And we're looking at not an age-segregated society, but mixed age groups. So these are some of the features that we're going to talk about today. And of course, the last one is that both of these paintings show children having fun, which is their main objective.
I was
Yes.
going to interject. I actually went to a one-room schoolhouse growing up, first and second grade. That's how old I am, so I got to see some of that dynamic growing up.
Yes. I think what we're saying here is that in our lifetime, we have seen remarkable changes in the structure and the ecology of children's play. We're going to talk about that.
They used imaginative play
What-
too.
Yep.
Yes.
When we think about the old days, we think of this golden age, and it's referred to by play historians as a golden age for children and their play. And we're really referring to the first half of the 20th century, where people got rid of these labor laws were established, child labor laws that freed kids from endless amounts of work. Although if you grew up on a farm, there was work to be done. We saw in this culture, our culture at that time, a very positive attitude toward children's free play. They're unstructured, peer-supervised play. And we saw a tremendous number of parks as the cities grew up, they created green spaces for families and kids throughout the cities. And these were full of kids. You could go out anytime when school wasn't in session and find lots of kids playing and playing on their own. Over the past 50 years in the United States and around the world, opportunities to play outdoors with other children have been continuously declining. And the phrase, the decline has been continuous and great, is what most people would focus on. That it hasn't been just in a decade some decline, that it's been throughout the 50 years, fairly steady decline. So after 50 years, it's a pretty sizable decline. And this decline in play is disquieting to developmental psychologists who have understood what play is all about and why play matters. Now, the greatest decline has been in children's outdoor play. When your kids come to the preschool classroom, they're playing. I was recently visiting a colleague who has a 5-year-old daughter, or really almost 5-year-old daughter. And she was with us quite a bit of the time, and that meant she was with 3 adults. And she was playing the whole time. She was playing while they were trying to get ready to go to school. Dad was getting more and more, you know. She was playing when we were in the restaurant eating. She was playing. She was playing in the car. She was playing in the restaurant. She was playing out shopping. She was playing. She was going to play no matter what. But that isn't quite the kind of play that I'm referring to. It is their tendency, though. We're going to look at that, too. Where does this inborn tendency to play come from? As I said, anybody more than a few decades old, and I think that includes most of us, has seen a decline in play. Now, I would say, living in Maine, perhaps less so. We were at a conference in New York, in Binghamton, and there were lots of folks from New York City there. And there are big national movements to reinvigorate children's play in major urban centers where it has all but disappeared. I wouldn't say that's true of Orono. And we'll talk about this afterwards, how true it is in your community. But in the 50s and 60s, and to a lesser degree in the 70s and 80s in the United States, it was possible to walk through any neighborhood after school, on weekends, or any time in the summer and see groups of children playing outdoors in loose affiliations. They knew these other kids. They were the neighborhood kids. And they would meet new kids. Today in many neighborhoods, it's hard to find groups of kids outside. If you do, they're likely to be wearing uniforms and following directions of coaches while their parents dutifully watch and cheer. And this is great physical activity, and I'm all for it, but it is not fulfilling the same function as unsupervised peer play. Now, how fast and exactly how much children's free play has declined over this 50 years is difficult to quantify. And the reason is you can't go out and do a study right now and figure it out, because you need data from 50 years ago, right? So you'll see in the studies that I'm going to cite how researchers get around this. Well, one good way is if somebody did some research 50 years ago or 40 years ago, find out about it, and if it was quantified, duplicate the methods and see what you get today. And we'll report a study that did that. Another method that we're going to report is asking mothers to describe their childhood and then compare it with their children's childhood with respect to play. And so the first method was used at the University of Michigan, and the dates were 1981. That was when the first study was done. A very thorough study of children's time, budgets, and play, and all activities. And then they were able then to replicate that 16 years later. And now, 16 years later, we're going to replicate that study again. So we would have data that would indicate a trend rather than just 2 data points. For right now, we can talk about the 2 data points. They found children not only played less in 97 than 81, but apparently had less free time for all self-chosen activities. So self-initiated activity, and particularly outdoor play with peers, are what have undergone the steepest decline. So if we look at some of their data, an overall decrease 25%. But it's, I'm going to comment on that. It's actually more than that. 58 decrease in conversing with others. 19% decrease in watching television, which is being made up by computer games. 18% increase in time spent in school. More time spent in school. More time doing homework. I know parents who have kids in the Orono school system, and boy, do they do a lot of homework. 168%, this was the highest, in shopping with parents. And you think, well, I wouldn't even have asked that question. They did. What it reflects is obviously parents who work, or a single mom who works. Well, you're not going to pay to get, you're going shopping, you're going to take whoever it is that you have care of with you. So you're seeing that. The play category that we referred to with the 25% decline included indoor play, computer games, board games, as well as outdoor play. So when you try to siphon off outdoor play and look at it, and outdoor play in peer groups, what is the decline? And here we have to estimate based on observations today and anecdotes and less hard data from 50 years ago or even 20 years ago. And I would estimate, having looked at this for a couple of years, that we're talking about a 400% decrease. That is, kids were playing 4 times as many hours in a week with their peers outdoors as they are today. And it might even be more than that. And of course, it's not going to be the same in all communities. Some communities allow for more of this than others. But we're talking about a major decline here in what we call children's time budget. How do children spend their day? And one of the answers here is they no longer spend much of their day playing with peers outdoors on their own. That's what's missing. Now, another study did survey over 800 mothers, and this was done very carefully, a nice sample across the U.S., different ethnic groups, different SES groups, West Coast, even California was included. So, and I don't know if they're playing more in California or not, but it sure seems that way. No, they're not.
Too much crime. Stay in.
Yeah, we're going to get to that point. And that's a coastal thing. I think you hear that in New York, and you hear it in LA. And you hear it in Chicago and Philadelphia. It's an urban thing. Now, when mothers were surveyed, and this admittedly is not as hard data, but it's still pretty good data, 85% said their own children play outdoors less than they do. 70% of mothers reported they had played outdoors daily versus 31% of their kids. 56 said that they played outdoors, they generally played for 3 hours or more. Long stretches. I remember a talk that Hillary Clinton gave about her childhood in Chicago growing up and how much she attributed her political skills and acumen to growing up in a neighborhood where she could play outdoors, negotiate the rules to the games, dealing with her peers as equals, working out conflicts. These were the skills we acquired in these activities that are no longer being acquired in these activities. Now, if they're being acquired somehow, somewhere else. Why the decline? Often this was blamed on the seductive qualities of television. And the old data were 6 hours a day kids were watching television. 6 hours a day. Now, of course, they're not watching television 6 hours a day now. But they're doing something else that more than makes up for it. Mothers themselves admitted that they restricted their children's outdoor play, and 82% cited safety reasons, including fear of crime. This led one New York columnist who had a very popular column in New York, wrote a book recently, A Nation of Wimps. And the attitude in New York City was that it would be irresponsible to allow your child to go outside on their own. So she was trying to counteract that self-imprisonment that she seemed to feel was detrimental to children's health and well-being. Now, if you ask the kids, surveys indicate they still prefer to play outdoors with friends if they have the chance to do so. 54% of mothers reported that playing outside at a playground or park ranked among the activities that made their children happiest. And this outranked all other activities, including watching television, films, or videos, which they like to do, using electronic games, and so forth. 69% of the U.S. sample said their #1 preferred place to play is outdoors. And maybe even in Maine in the wintertime. It doesn't matter. They still like to go outdoors, probably more than we do. Something to keep in mind. Now, another cause of this decline is the increased time and weight given to schooling and other adult-directed school-like activities, including after-school activities. You know, and listening to Kevin describe his 2 children, they're heavily engaged in all kinds of activities, in music and sports, and this is sort of true of older kids. And here we're really kind of concentrating on younger kids. The length of the school year and the school day have both increased. More young children are attending academically oriented kindergartens and preschools than in times past. Recess periods have been reduced or completely eliminated. This is very foolhardy. This is very foolhardy. And it will have differential effects for boys versus girls. Why is the decline in children's play disconcerting? Well, the basic answer is because play has always been thought to serve the child's development, and in many different ways. In addition, as a child psychologist, probably the most robust indicator of the child's present-day mental health is how much they're engaged in play, or turn it around, the absence of play. If they're not capable of playing and they're not having fun, you can bet there is something wrong. They could be physically sick that day, or it could be other things. So we would say, yeah, it's critical to development. It's not a luxury. Why is it critical? Well, the story I was telling about Hillary, this kind of peer activity that's unsupervised, you might monitor it, but you're not directly controlling it, is the key. That allows kids to solve their own problems, negotiate their own rules, and resolve conflicts that occur before you jump in and resolve them for them. Sometimes you need to do that, no question. But other times you can let things go and see what abilities they actually can exhibit. Probably in a more general sense, play develops confident, flexible minds that are open to new possibilities. That's the nature of play. That's playing around with stuff. The IBMers love play. Anybody interested in invention, creativity, they love play because that's where it comes from. It develops creativity, resilience, independence, and leadership. Again, leadership comes from the fact that the adult isn't providing it. Strengthens relationships, empathy, and last but not least, these days, helps grow strong, healthy bodies and reduces stress. So play, culture of play in early childhood is critical to their overall health and well-being. They learn to question, predict, hypothesize, evaluate, analyze. All cognitive features that we like to see. That's the flexible mind business. They form and substantiate opinions and persist through adversity in play. Now, when we ask the question, why is play important? Where does this come from? We can look at animals and we find there's no mammal out there that doesn't play. And in fact, the language of play is so universal that here we have a husky that was staked out for the night playing with a polar bear who wandered by. And you can see in the bottom shot, this is a relaxation of tension between two natural predator-prey. Polar bears could eat a husky if they're hungry enough. This particular bear was coming out of hibernation. But still, the importance of finding a play partner was big, strong enough in the repertoire of needs that he took the opportunity. Now, what was interesting about this particular experience is that the huskies were all staked out, and there were like a dozen. And this polar bear started wandering in. And all the dogs started barking, but the lead dog wasn't barking at all. Wagging his tail. A play posture is a lot like a submissive posture because it's non-threatening for a dog to go down on its haunches. And this was an invitation to play that the polar bear understood. And they played for a good hour as it got dark. But more interestingly, for 3 weeks, every day in the afternoon, this polar bear would come back for a play session. Are people interested in this stuff? 9 million hits. If you want to go see this on YouTube, 9 million people have seen this. And you can just Google something like polar bear husky play, and you'll get it. You know how to use these things.
Oh my God, look at that. That's so
We see all kinds of play in our pets. And these are not ferocious tigers. This is play. One of the things about play is that rough and tumble play often looks a little bit like aggression. But it is not. It's not anything like it because of the affective qualities.
Oh my God, that's so cute.
And yes, these are mammals, and they do like to play. And we could go on. I mean, we could just spend the next 3 days watching the animals at play. I would recommend, if you're interested, there's some fascinating YouTube on this, and you'll love to see this stuff. It's great stuff. And a lot of it is cross-species play. So you have play going on between a little, in a Chinese zoo, a little tiger and a monkey. And they're playing chase games and rough and tumble play. And they understand the language of play, even across species. So what can we say about animal play? Very quickly, we see that play is a stage that immediately follows the attachment phase. And so you don't see play in early infancy, but very quickly you see it begin to rise and to peak, and then gradually decline. And that's true for whatever species you're interested in, including humans. We see that play in mammals can be costly. It's certainly costly in terms of energy expenditure. It's a high energy activity. 5 5 to 10% increase in energy consumption, meaning more food is required. It also can involve a risk of injury, especially rough and tumble play in gorillas or bears or wolves. And it can involve a risk of predation in species like rabbits who aren't watching while they're playing. Now, this is used in biological circles as evidence for the function of play, because the idea is very simple. If there are costs to play, and yet we see that it's universal, there must be offsetting benefits. There have to be, or it wouldn't have evolved like that. It wouldn't be pervasive. So what would be some of the functions biologists would attribute to play in mammals? Well, obviously exercise and physical development, development of coordination, of skills, climbing and chasing, acquisition of information, hunting skills, those kittens, you know, that the little play that they're, you know, always interested in little objects that go running around. Well, yeah, that's part of their repertoire of skill development for hunting. And these are referred to as delayed benefits, because the adult skills are practiced during an earlier period where they're not serving any function. Most people would say one of the definitions of play is it serves no function. That is, it has no immediate function like work. Right? So if you're planting crops, that's work. You're investing in the future. It's instrumental. You have a goal. But play doesn't have these things. But of course, we're saying play serves multiple functions. But not from the child's point of view. They're just playing for fun. Now, when we get closer to humans, primates, we see same-sex peer groups, just like we do in kids, naturally arise. And again, this is right after the attachment phase. We see juvenile male cohorts spending much of their time on the fringes of the troop in active physical play. For example, nearly half of the waking hours of young male gorillas are spent in rough play with each other. Yep?
In humans, though, how do we differentiate? You said it's natural, but we also gear our children to play. You know, we teach gender differentiation. So how do you know how much is nature versus nurture?
Good question, and you're anticipating exactly where we're going to go.
Oh. I get in trouble for that all the time.
That's all right. You got it. You're right on the track. For primates, especially, social play is critical for developing social bonds and social skills. Remember, primates are all group living, other than a few prosimians. But most primates that we think of are group living, and it's very important to make your way in the group, learn the signals, communication skills that are needed to function in the group. But when we look at primates, we see that the manner in which male and female primate juveniles are socialized is very different. And we're going to take a look at this general difference, this general pattern that we see by looking at the most studied primate, the rhesus macaque. This is the only species other than humans in the primate world that is expanding in number and territory. Many of the primates are moving toward extinction. Rhesus are everywhere. They're a very adaptive species. And they are a group living species. This would be a typical group with the infant to juvenile. This is not a young infant, surrounded by older members of the group. There's their range. You can see that their range is pretty extensive. We share 93% of our genes with them. And the main reason that I'm using them is they've been intensely studied. Because they're more numerous, they're studied in places like Bethesda, Maryland, at NIH, the Wisconsin Regional Primate Center, and a lot of different centers around the globe. We see stark sex differences in the play behavior. Like humans, sex differences are always relative rather than absolute. So you're kind of looking at overlapping curves. Compared to males, let's take a look at the play style of young females and really their overall socialization pattern. They spend considerably more time in the presence of adult females. At sexual maturity, they remain with their mothers, sisters, aunts, and daughters for the rest of their lives. So this is a matrilineal society. They're investing in these relationships, and there is joint care of all infants. Female rhesus monkeys show considerably more interest in young infants and engage in alloparenting or play parenting throughout their juvenile years. Now, alloparenting means they would be under the monitoring of the mother, taking the infant and playing with the infant, carrying the infant throughout much of the day. So they're like babysitters, and they are doing this because this is what they choose to do. Talk about choice. This is what they're choosing to do. Now, research in 5 species show that the chances of survival of the monkey's firstborn is 2 to 4 times higher for mothers with previous experience in caring for infants. So this is the reason that the behavior has been selected for and is in their repertoire. And this is across different species of monkeys, including the rhesus. Now, female rhesus monkeys hold their daughters closer. They show more concern if they should wander. So they kind of also are part of this in trying to keep their daughters closer by them. In contrast, rhesus mothers will more often direct displays of anger to male offspring, and males are weaned at an earlier age. Now, why would they be directing displays of anger?
Because they did it first.
They are directing displays of anger to a juvenile male monkey that wants to clamber all over them and see if they could provoke you into fighting. So they're being chased away. Mothers are not in the house.
Yeah, basically.
Take it outside. That's a direct quote from a rhesus mother. Now, when we look at the male counterparts, they're spending more time in the company of peers, meaning male peers, away from the infants, the mothers, the aunts, and so on, where they engage in high-energy chase and play fighting. Now, they have to leave their natal troop at sexual maturity and make their way into a hierarchy dominated by males that are not their relatives. So this behavior is presumably serving that function in the life history of a male. Notice that the life histories are very different in terms of what's required to make a living and to eventually have reproductive success. In the one case, the female is remaining with the group that she was born into, close to her mother's sister, her mother, her sisters, her aunts, and even grandmother. And that group would always be caring for whatever new infant is being born. The males could be that infant. And so during their attachment phase, they're surrounded by all of this care. But by the time they have moved we'll call it toddler phase, they are now in a different behavioral program that is instinctive and which is leading them to engage in chasing and play fighting almost all the time when they have peers around to do this. So these groups would be 60 individuals, and so you would have a mixed age peer group where male infants, after being weaned earlier than females, are now part of a clique of males that are mixed age, and they begin to sort themselves out. And the rough and tumble play is one of the ways that they're sorting out eventual status in the group. So we can say, again, with our cost-benefit analysis, all this rough and tumble play is costly. While females don't shun this rough and tumble play, they participate rarely and with less energy. As adults, males engage in more aggression than females, who generally avoid aggression and direct competition. It certainly doesn't pay with infants in close proximity. Yep.
When males are playing outside, when boys are playing outside, they also are judging who's the leader and who's
Right.
the followers, and
Right.
just like the monkeys.
We're almost there. I wanted to lay this out so because I didn't, you guys are expert. You guys are expert in preschool behavior, and you can see some of what you see here. Yeah, we're saying this is a primate pattern that is pretty widespread, and the pattern of greater aggression in males is due to selection pressures resulting from their forced exodus. They have no choice. They are forced out of their group. And there's a period of time before they get established in a new truth. And during this period of time, 40 to 50% may perish. So this is where selection is playing a role, right? In a very different way between males and females. Now, rough and tumble play is influenced by hormones, social rearing, and overall context, all of these factors. But if we just want to isolate a factor in experimental work, we can't. So the clearest evidence we have in research on the endocrine system is for the direct effect of sex hormones on behavior, where we find in experimental research with rhesus, prenatal exposure to higher levels of androgen in females increases their physical competition and high energy physical play. So we're playing around with, if evolution is working here, and if biology is playing a role, what is the mechanism? And the mechanism is the neuroendocrine system, which organizes development differently at birth by organizing the development of the male or female, given the presence of a Y chromosome. Again, at different times, sex hormones also organize behavior. And of course, we see this most clearly in humans at puberty. There is no puberty in rhesus, right? Puberty is itself a very kind of unique human invention. It is biological. And it has to do with our extended childhood. But I don't want to get into all of these features of our life history. For the moment, this is probably the strongest evidence we have of the direct influence of hormone on behavior. Now, we can look at experimental evidence in humans. What about steroid use? How does that affect behavior? One of the reasons this is outlawed is that it does affect aggression. It does affect aggression. And I don't think too many people need to be convinced of that either. Now, as I was saying, monkey infants seem to prefer same-sex peers at an early age. And by juvenile period, the gender segregation is the rule, with the troop really kind of doing different things and away from one another. This differential socialization is certainly fostering its own gender differences in behavior. But we see with research on isolated rhesus that sex differences in behavior also obtain. So it can't be just socialization. But I would argue that, and I'm extending this argument to humans, peer socialization is producing a lot of the sex differences, extending whatever biology provides.
Right. They get rewarded for it.
Peers are rewarding different things. Yeah.
I have a friend who, she has 5 boys, and we have mutual friends that have all little girls. And she told me the other day, she said, Sarah, I have finally gotten to the point that any of my friends that have strictly girls, If they want to get together for a play date, I tell them to come to my house, because my house is boy-proof, and their house is not. And she's like, and
She
boys,
doesn't want to pay any extra bills.
yeah, exactly. She's like, boys play is not done until something is built and something is destroyed. That's just the way boys play. Whereas she's like, I was constantly having to, don't touch, don't touch, don't touch, don't touch, if I would go to a friend's house that their house wasn't boy-proof.
But I raised my daughter without those kind of gender rules, and I tell you what my daughter had. I had to not have decorative things out. She wrestled and slammed.
Yeah, right.
I'm not saying.
And this
No,
is always the case. That's
Yeah.
why I say these are overlapping curves, and you can find, and we have a name for them, right? What do we call a girl who is
Tomboy.
tomboy, beating up everybody?
She was a
Yeah.
strong
A tomboy.
girl, I said.
Tomboy.
Right.
And that is not a derogatory term. And particularly with Title IX and more sports, you know, with girls of all ages, this is even encouraged. What's the opposite term?
Yeah.
A boy who's behaving like a girl,
A fairy or a sissy.
a sissy.
Feminine.
You know, in Quebec, where I spent 10 years, the French, you had garçon manqué, meaning literally you miss being a boy. It's very much like tomboy. And guess what the term was for the opposite? They would use the term, and this was used by peers, a baby lala. Now, if you're a 4-year-old boy,
And you're called
a baby lala.
That's not a good sign.
This is not a real, yeah, this is not a real desirable thing. You don't even need a translation for that one. Have you ever heard that term?
Nope.
Baby lala, yeah. Yeah, and of course they say it in a sing-song voice, you
Yeah.
know, so you can see. Now, in talking about children, okay, we would not expect the same pattern. We would expect to see similarities, but not identical. And certainly, whenever we shift to humans, we're introducing culture. And cultures can maximize or minimize these gender differences. This culture is minimizing. The Ashanti over in Africa are maximizing, right? And one of the ways that you minimize or maximize this is through peer interaction. Because peers are going to do what they're going to do. Now, let's start our comparison here. We would say, first of all, as with all mammals, and we are a mammal, play is a primary affective motivational system. It's built in. And I say affective motivational because that's what's involved. The desire to play is high, and while playing, obviously you're engaged in a lot of emotional expression, and emotion regulation. And I'm going to look to this as some of the key functions that it serves in human children. Yeah.
Are you saying that while they're outside, there should be no structured, it should all be free? I mean, they should be allowed to do
Yeah, I
what they
think
want outside?
even indoors, the concept of free play indoors, of course, which has rules.
Yes.
Right, you know, running, you know, jump, you know, and all that. But the concept of real free play indoors is self-initiated activity, self-guided activity. That the child's own developmental level and interests guide what they select to work with. And their activities are not controlled by somebody who tells them what to do. Now it's time to do this, now it's time to do that. Now, we do want to introduce structure in any preschool program, and as early as possible. But we don't want to have the whole day structure.
I was talking
So
about
free
outside.
play indoors is, and outdoors too, self-guided activities. Some kids may go to the swing set. Some kids may go to the sandbox. Other kids, as soon as they get outside, they're running. And they find each other quickly. And one of the things that you'll see, and I would argue this, rather than say gender segregation, kids segregate on the basis of behavioral compatibility.
Oh my God, that's so true.
And this is even before they have the gender concept.
So there should be no structure outside?
I think that what what I see going on is that what the adult does is structure the environment, not the kids. So you set up the environment to be safe, to have, you know, we consciously looked for toys that allowed social interaction. You know, the traditional swing set is still there, but you notice that's parallel play.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have some round, we have a little merry-go-round, there are different kinds of things that you could structure that bring kids together in interaction. Also having just a free space to run. If you take your whole playground and clutter it with all these wonderful toys, you're kind of limiting what they can do in terms of kicking the ball around and running after it. So, and kids love to run. You know, and the parents love to have you let their kids do this and get totally tired down. And so structure comes from the adult, but not necessarily controlling the child's activity once they're outside. I think that at different times in the day, you know, and think about this from the child's point of view. You've got them for how many hours? Well, in our program, it's a shorter amount of time. But in some programs, it could be 8 hours, 10 hours. See, and so there has to be ample time for the child to do what the child wants to do, right? And this can be done at the beginning of the day, and the end of the day, and the middle of the day, or however you structure it. But that's how you're influencing child development, more than monitoring their play, I'm sorry, controlling their play. Always monitoring their play, yeah.
Do you think that a natural playground is better than a playground that has toys? I mean,
No, I think you have to have a balance, yeah.
that would be sweet.
If you have the space, you know, it's all a matter of how much space you have. If you had a space like this room, for example, you could have half of the space open for this kind of running and still have plenty of toys. Now, if we look at kids, they're showing the same U-shaped curve, very little play in early infancy. The attachment period predominates, and then right after that, and partly as the more successful the attachment phase is, the more kids are inclined to play. This is going to continue to rise through the preschool years and then gradually decline. Now, this is what we see. Naturalistic studies of play deprivation, which of course these are experimental studies in rats and in primates. And now we have some naturalistic studies of play deprivation, especially in elementary schools where recess is eliminated. This shows the same thing that the animal research shows, which is a rebound effect. If you deprive kids of play, as soon as you let them play, they're going to want to play longer and with more energy. And that should tell you something about how it affects their time in school. So that the first grader or the third grader or the fifth grader who is not given the opportunity for physical exercise play is not going to be concentrating as well as they could be otherwise. And if you give them the opportunity to play, they will take it. We see gender segregation. It is not absolute, as we were alluding to. We do see these two types of play and differences in them. Play parenting and rough and tumble play are probably the two that show the most degree of sex difference, right? And again, this difference is going to be minimized or maximized in part by the society. But if you let peers intervene, they're going to be separating for a time the two genders. And I'll show you in a minute how they do that. Now, social play for all kids, boys and girls, because I'm not really trying to emphasize the gender difference. Social play facilitates peer relations. This is where your friends are. The kids you play with, the kids you want to play with, the kids you let into your play group. And here we see a sex difference with respect to exclusivity. We're looking at getting a sense of oneself with respect to risk-taking in play. And that can be physical risk-taking or social risk-taking. What I'm going to stress is the emotion regulation side. I think this is probably the key skill that needs to be acquired. And here we see, around the globe, boys engaging in rough and tumble play. In the U.S., this is about 4 to 5 times as often as girls. Did you ever notice this? Now, this is in fact built in, but it's also reinforced, and particularly by, I would say, males. Male peers and fathers are contributing, as we look at the behavioral reinforcement, they're contributing to these sex differences. Example, you have a nice group of 15 4-year-olds, and they just gone outside. And one little boy jumps on the back of another peer who turns around and tells them not to do that again. And jumps on the back of another peer who turns around laughing, and they begin to wrestle. And that's what we mean by reinforcement. Behavior has been reinforced or not. We also are talking about behavioral compatibility. That is, in playing together, if you're playing in your natural style of play, are you compatible with your play partner? That's what we think is initially sorting out these differences that we see. Not gender, because they appear prior to learning the gender concept. So we're seeing a lot of this behavior. Now, we know it has a function in primates. If we eliminate this in humans, what will happen? And we're going to look at that question from a couple of different angles. This is just more cross-cultural research. I think here is a nuance. Gender differences in rough and tumble play do not extend to chasing. Games that involve chasing are as interesting to girls, and they participate as often as boys do. And what they like is to be chased. You know, so you don't want to be it. You don't want to be it. You want to be chased. And chasing, of course, is healthy activity, builds cardiovascular strength. We see a lot of jumping in girls and boys. Jumping. Jumping is healthy, builds bone density. It's naturally programmed in. The physical self cannot develop without exercise. Jumping directly contributes to bone density. Yep, exercise. So you're getting physical benefits from these activities. That's why they're built in. Now, when we look at girls, what are they doing? Hopscotch, jump rope, there's a lot of jumping going on. Now we see kids playing volleyball and basketball. Again, a lot of jumping going on. These abilities are adaptive in a variety of ways. Chasing and running away can still save lives. We can see this, unfortunately, in our own culture from time to time. There are lots of benefits to physical exercise play, and many of these are obvious. Short-term benefits involve cardiovascular health, muscular development, and combined with proper diet, long-term habits of healthy exercise will help prevent obesity, which, as you know, has reached epidemic, if not the biggest price tag we're going to be paying in the next 20 years, is obesity and diabetes, which are rampant and at earlier and earlier ages. Currently, 2 out of 3 American adults are overweight or obese, and the number climbs annually. That's what we mean by an epidemic. And this is affecting minority and low socioeconomic groups disproportionately because of the fast food availability, which is where the bulk of the problem resides. we're not going to get into this, but there's also epigenetic work that suggests that what your mother ate can, in fact, directly contribute to your obesity, and maybe even what your grandparents were eating. So that, and again, this would take a whole lecture to explain how epigenetics works. But in a nutshell, methyl molecules attach themselves to the genome, to the DNA, and are transmitted intergenerationally. So that can affect things like adult weight. Diet is critical, and the American diet is terrible. I don't think that the epidemic is due to a decline in exercise, because we don't see a decline in exercise. I mean, kids are exercising today about what they were 10 or 20 years ago. The numbers, you know, you don't expect obesity in childhood because of the high metabolic rate and the activity level of children. They can eat as much as they want, it seems, if they're eating the right food. But here we see, in 1980, 6.5%. And that has tripled, more than tripled. And that's in children, 6 to 12. In adolescents, 5 to 18%. So those are 2008 numbers. 2012 is worse. So habits. I think another thing that you're helping parents do is establish healthy habits, which should include diet and exercise. Now, getting back to the cognitive features, and I think this pertains to boys. If there's not enough physical activity in the routine, in the daily routine, there will be effects. And this will affect different kids differently. Kids who need more exercise naturally, including some girls, will be more affected by this. Opportunities for vigorous play in the early years, and here we would say from 3 to 12. That has to be provided. Otherwise, you're disrupting even the cognitive activity that you're trying to foster. Sustained attention. And different research has been oriented in demonstrating these effects. When children are deprived of exercise indoors, then given an opportunity for outdoor play, the intensity and duration of their exercise play increases. That's the rebound effect. But their ability to concentrate and sustain attention also increases after the play. And lastly, and I think most importantly, we're looking at emotional states that mediate social bonding in children's play. And this is particularly true when it's not structured by adults. So, emotion regulation in situations of high arousal is something that we expect to consider as important today as it ever was. This is one of the real failures that we see among adolescent boys and young men. The ability to maintain an organized state under conditions of high arousal. Dysregulation here, and it could only be in a single instance, could cost you big time. So that the ability to remain regulated, even under conditions of high arousal, is what's being fostered in the routine of the rough and tumble play and the exercise play. Yeah.
How come these places are allowed to eliminate recess then? I mean, shouldn't somebody be stepping in if it's this? I mean, I know it's
it's a good question. I think the basic answer is, we are an experimental society. We try out all kinds of stuff and then discover it's not good for us. From drugs to things like eliminating recess. And a lot of this is driven economically in a narrow-minded sense. So, you have the national trend toward evaluation and test scores. How does recess contribute to that? Let's eliminate it.
Exactly.
same thing that they want to do with music and stuff like that. If they
Yeah.
don't think that it's that important, they just eliminate it.
Right. Right, and you know, if you're the town manager and you've just had the bridge across the Stillwater collapse, and there are two proposals. One is to build a musical center, and the other is to rebuild the bridge. Who do you think is going to vote for which? So we do have priorities. We do have priorities. Unfortunately, in times of relative shortage, we are, in the United States, capable of eliminating things on this basis. And we have to remind ourselves, wait a minute now, who is the richest country in the world? If we can't do it, I mean, we really need to kind of preserve, and this is really the community's value system. Those things that are most important.
But who decides if music is less important than, say, algebra? Who's to say that it is?
But you know how your parent is worried about the speech thing being a lack of intelligence? I mean, if you work in say, a preschool that doesn't believe in sending home colored papers, you still have to make up one every week to hang on the refrigerator, or parents don't think their children are learning anything. They think they need that. That's where this homework craziness has come from.
One of the dangers of our type of society is we're only paying attention to the things that we can evaluate. Now, with respect to young children, what do we evaluate? Well, height and weight, that's pretty easy. And guess what? It's the cognitive stuff that is easier to evaluate than social emotional. And partly for the reasons that were alluded to. You can't do it in 20 minutes.
But if we've connected the cognitive with the
That's what
exercise.
some of this research is connecting the cognitive. And I would say that that's important. But I'm also saying this, that these kinds of unstructured, rough and tumble playbouts, even in an early period, are part of the natural repertoire of our species and other species, whereby individuals express and control and regulate affective states of fear and anger. Those are the two that need management. Now, mostly what's going on is they're having fun, and that too is important. The positive emotions build positive relationships, so that by the time kids are now out of preschool, into middle school, and even on to high school, who are their best friends? Chances are the kids they play with, either on a sports team or in the neighborhood. You know, and so there's a very positive side to play. But in addition, there is this emotional regulation side. And it's the unsupervised social play that provides an opportunity to learn about emotional communication. When did you go too far? How do you adjust things? This is what friends have to do in order to remain friends. Right? They have to make these adjustments. They have to learn about the effects of their behavior on their friends. And they're motivated to do so. So earlier in your discussion, you were talking about calling attention in an act of discipline to the consequences of the child's misbehavior on the other child, that they just hit with a toy, you know, having taken it from them and then banged them on the head with it. Well, yeah, you want to intervene there, right? And what I've always said is that your first goal in your intervention is to affect the nervous system of the child. If you're giving a rational explanation, Kevin was alluding to the long explanation. You're giving this long, rational explanation about why they shouldn't do this. Forget it. You know, holding the child, looking at them directly, tone of voice, short messages, but not focused on the consequences for them. Like if you don't stop doing that, you know, now focus the consequence on the crying child who's just suffered the effects of their misbehavior. So I think there are ways to intervene here that are effective. And by effective I mean that the behavior is gradually eliminated. Especially, you know, I've seen kids with a metal truck banging a kid on the head. I was an observer in a classroom at the time. We were obviously not supposed to be intervening, but that was an opportunity to intervene.
Yeah.
You know, so that even if you are doing research, you're going to do something when you see that. So the language of play and emotion management during play and all that play involves is one of those lessons that we think can't be, that there's no real practical substitute for this. Now, one of the researchers that has looked at this, Stuart Brown, who is president of the American Society for Play, interviewed 6,000 individuals, mostly men. Why mostly men? These were prisoners. These were people who were incarcerated. And he was interested in the story of their lives. What happened to them when they were children? What could they relate? How did they talk about this? And this was a kind of an open-ended, he had a certain list of questions that he asked everybody, but it was a fairly open-ended interview. Stuart is a psychiatrist. He believes that the absence of unsupervised preschool play, in particular, results in a deficit in reading these signals that lead to major difficulties as group play becomes more complex. So that kids who are not learning this early on get into bigger trouble later on. Deficits in reading play signals can lead to inappropriate management of aggression, manifested by hyperaggression or withdrawal. In his retrospective clinical analysis, he repeatedly finds that the roots of this dysfunction precede elementary school. Now, as an attachment theorist, I would have something to say about this, that the roots are probably not anchored in the play period, but are manifested during the play period, and may be anchored in an earlier affective system, the attachment system. But these are two theorists arguing. I would say that this extensive experience, 6,000 interviews, does give him some opportunity to lecture us on what he thinks is missing in the lives of these men who grew up with poor emotion regulation skills. And some of this is not just anger management, but controlling fear, right? So that you get withdrawal and then hyper-aggressive behavior. So to conclude, we think that for boys especially, rough and tumble play in early childhood can provide a scaffold for learning emotion regulation skills that are related to managing anger and aggression in particular. And this is learned in the absence of adult control. Self-control, and that's what we're talking about here, is really not fostered by external control. Physical punishment, for example, of aggressive boys does not produce greater self-control. It models aggression, and these kids become more aggressive when they're the bigger of the two, which is what their parents and often their fathers directly teach them during acts of physical aggression. It's that if you're bigger and stronger, that's what counts.
Leads to bullying.
Yeah, right.
Well, maybe that's one aspect I was wondering about like I lived a short time in well, I lived in this area for a short time in California. There was really a ghetto, and there were a lot of children who could play freely, but they had no adult monitoring and no adult intervention, and I don't think they were playing better ultimately. I mean, I don't think it was contributing to the good stuff, but then I was thinking they also didn't have a safety. They didn't have a safe place.
Yeah.
For that, you know, and that, but then also, like you're saying, the home aggression was probably there as well in a lot of cases.
Right. You're not going to solve society's problems, you know, with one technique. And so, safe places to play. This was a large part of our discussion in Binghamton, with examples from South Florida and some of the worst neighborhoods that you can imagine with respect to violence on the street and gang-related violence in particular.
Right.
And this is still radically much more a male thing, you know, in 90% or more. And so growing up in those neighborhoods is fraught with risk. And in this particular neighborhood in South Florida, these are African-American boys who are looking for places to congregate and to play, but are being coerced into gang membership and turf control. So adults are obviously needed in situations like that, which are so far removed from what is ideal, that they need to be corrected. Now, one of the things that was learned is that if you go and put a playground, this really beautiful playground in such a neighborhood, it'll be destroyed almost overnight. And the woman who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago for economics had a thesis that if you, this is sort of the counter argument to the tragedy of the commons, she had a thesis where if you gave the people who live in the neighborhood decision-making power, real power, over how these things come about, guess what? They make sure it's preserved and that it's not destroyed, because they're the community leaders, and they can affect these changes that people from the outside can't. So Kaboom, for example, if you Google that, and by the way, I'm going to have posted online a long set of online resources that have been collected from around the country with groups that are promoting play. And some of these groups are actually promoting playgrounds in areas like this South Florida neighborhood. So that there's been some growth and understanding in how to do this, how to make a community, in fact, come together over this, which actually turns out to be a great device, a great device for beginning to chip away at gang-ridden, violent neighborhoods by creating safe places that people want to invest in. And the community comes together over this. So it actually is promoting community integration at the same time as providing a good place for children to go and play. One of the things that's a common feature to these playgrounds is a lot of space is given and attention given to interesting places for adults to interact near where the kids are playing, so that you have these things created so that the adults are coming to the center, not just the kids, right? So that you do have some monitoring going on. And we discussed this at length, and I was sort of, I guess I was a little bit on the skeptical side for inner city playgrounds. You know, and the business of unsupervised play. I was actually on the side of, well, I was being a devil's advocate in some of these places, saying, you know, if you encourage this kind of thing, as soon as one really negative thing happens, you can expect a backlash. So that you have to provide safety, and that is also being discussed. In Binghamton, they have a build-your-own playground project where neighborhood groups can submit their own design and get $20,000 to put together a plan that'll then be executed to take, and the city is obviously cooperating. Binghamton has a fairly large population, but one that's been in decline. And so there are buildings that have been destroyed, and the neighborhood is riddled with just open lots that aren't serving any function except for being an eyesore. And so some of these open lots are being transformed into public play spaces. So it's in their words, one neighborhood at a time. That's the level of intervention here. One neighborhood at a time. Again, a lot of these resources will be online. One is real easy to remember, Kaboom, spelled just like you would expect, I think with an exclamation. And this is a national organization for building playgrounds in the United States. Now, I think some of this I live in Blue Hill. I see kids playing all the time. Some of this doesn't pertain as much to us as it does to other places. And I think we can thank our lucky stars for that. That is, I think that many of the towns that I visited in the area are a pretty healthy place for families and children. Now, there's some problems on the coast and really throughout. We've seen, there are endemic problems with alcoholism on the coast. This is always bad. We've now seen a rise in this ridiculous drug use that is quite astounding to see parents engaged in. And so there are some real health issues that trump all of these things that are obviously more urgent problems to solve. But I think that for all kids, and the reason that I put this lecture together, I think all kids benefit from play spaces that are safe. One lady in New York said, well, even if I let my kid go out to play in the park, who's he going to play with? Nobody's there, and that is a problem. That is, there has to be a turnover. You can't just turn back the clock. She could send her child out, but then there's nobody in the park. So some of these problems are going to be a long time. Cities like Binghamton provide a good kind of middle ground. They definitely need help, but their problems aren't as big as the South Florida, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York kind of problems. And then Orono, Old Town, Brewer, Blue Hill, Ellsworth, how big are our problems? I mean, they're not that big.
In comparison.
Yeah, they're not that big. So I think our kids are fortunate to have a fairly healthy lifestyle around these issues here. Recess and elementary school administrators need to pay attention to research on this that suggests that they're actually working against themselves by eliminating these activities and not seeing them as the vital part of the school day. Even if all you are interested in is cognitive achievement, they can still pay dividends.
Michelle Obama is trying to get things going with get out, get exercise and stuff like that.
Yes.
But that's more exercise, not necessarily
I think,
play.
I'm not against exercise. That's part of this. But you can see that in this list here, we're not highlighting the exercise benefit. It is, however, a part of the overall problem that we're trying to solve for American youth. And yet I would say that it's probably not so much lack of exercise as the availability of fast food, meaning fats and sugars in the diet, cheap food, and the corrosive impact that has. Even like something as simple as no longer providing milk at school, but only because Coke and Pepsi are paying for it. Dispensers of some of the worst carbohydrates you'll ever taste. And habits, of course. This is why these companies are providing this free service, is to get the habit, to get the kids in the habit of drinking this kind of fruitless calorie and carbohydrate drinks. So we have things to correct. It's not like we lack the knowledge. We know that this kind of diet is not good for physical development. But there does need to be some corrective action taken. And here I'm referring to the public school system. What they provide kids. Yep.
We're lucky in the city of Portland recently all soda, it's been banned within the schools for years, but now at sporting events. when the booster, the football boosters, whatever, they're not allowed to be serving. They have to have a balance between, they're going to offer soda to purchase, you got to have the water, you got to have the milk. You can't just do all of the fried foods. You must be offering healthier wraps and
Right.
whatnot. And I think also we're lucky too, at least in our own, my own elementary school, you know, not only is recess still an integral part, recess several times a day, especially with the younger kids, you know, kindergarten, first, second grade, at least twice a day, in kindergarten, first grade, 3 times a day. My other son is in 5th grade. No, he doesn't go outside twice a day, but sometimes they get them outside then twice a day, year round, just for that extra energy. And their test scores, because they were a failing school, have soared because of that.
Yeah, I'd heard that about soda pop in Portland.
Yeah, that's go. And it's really about the school board. That's who starts making some of the
Right.
decisions. So
Oh, and parents are on those boards.
parents, yes, so
Right.
get to the meetings and
Right. Some of this stuff is easy to solve, like that, right? It's fairly easy to solve. How does living in Portland, how do kids find their peers outdoors?
you know, there are, it depends on where you are. Where I happen to live a busy road, and we have 1 tree in our backyard. So there really isn't as much unless I'm driving to go get my friend's
Right.
sons. You know,
Right.
he's now almost 11, he can ride his bike now. But my 7-year-old, no, in order for him to go find his peers, I have to go drive or...
You have to arrange it.
We have to arrange
Yeah.
it. Now, there are definitely pockets, especially in the housing projects, where that kids are all out all the time, and you much see that a lot freer. And it also, we have a huge Somalian population, and a lot in their culture is kids are outdoors, go for it, everyone's watching everyone else's child, and you'll see in certain areas much more kids outside and whatnot.
Yeah. You know, I still have some ambivalence about, and I think you were commenting in that direction about just turning them loose. You know, and well, you know, I think you always have to monitor the intended effects that you think you're going to have, along with the unintended effects that you had no idea you were introducing. And so you really do have to pay close attention to the changes that you make so that you're confident that things can go forward. Now, I think that's being done in a place like Binghamton because they've recently received federal money for a fairly substantial grant to conduct research around their pilot program of building these public playgrounds in these cities, so that they're actually able to look at the effects it has in the neighborhood, including decreasing the rate of crime in the neighborhood, which is often gang-fed, right? So you're trying to cut some of these problems at their roots by not having the gangs be the only thing out there, you know, for somewhat older kids. But, you know, we'll see. I mean, this research is just getting underway. This was a program that was just getting started at a conference 1.5 years ago that I had the opportunity to go down and meet with these people. The other thing I haven't commented on is we're interested in research on mixed-age play and looking at its effects on cooperation and leadership and opportunities for growth where kids of different ages can play together. And it turns out that's a very difficult thing to study, as Chow was discovering, just in terms of the logistics of putting it together. It's easier to study kids that are all in one program rather than elementary school, preschool, putting it together. But Peter Gray has done a lot of this work in Boston, in areas outside of Boston, where they have innovative schools that are grades 1 through 12, and they have a complete mixed age sort of structure with a lot of self-initiated activities.
Is it Montessori?
And, pardon?
Is it Montessori?
No.
Here? My daughter's Montessori, well, my Montessori's.
It's, I'm trying to remember the name of it.
That's okay.
It'll come to me after we're all gone.
Driving
That's
back to
okay.
Bluefield.
This has been a program that's been ongoing for 20 years, right? So now they have some data. They have seen their graduates and how they perform, and they're doing quite well. One thing I would say about their program is they get a lot of really bright kids. So it's not a random sample. They're getting parents who send their kids Somerville, who send their kids there probably are not average at all. And so if their kids are all above average when they come out, it's hard to say what did that. Yeah.
At my school, we don't determine activities on age, and I'm always telling, older kids that younger kids can teach them, telling the younger kids they can teach someone if they know something.
Yeah,
and
right.
sharing information.
And we're seeing in our research, we're seeing they're pretty good. They're pretty good at it. We have a little game that which is with Kinect, using an Xbox, so that your movement is actually affecting what you're seeing, and they're little, these are scaled down for young kids. They're very popular with elementary school kids. And of course, in playing the game, you'll be doing stuff like this. And so they're getting a fair amount of exercise, like vis-a-vis the screen, played usually with 2 players. And because of the interactive quality, the younger kids benefit greatly by having an older peer. And they're engaged in teaching in a very appropriate way, not over-controlling. They invite the other younger kids to play, but they do help them and show them what to do. So it's a lot like what you would see siblings do at home, where you have a 9-year-old older sister and a 6-year-old little brother, right? And she's showing them how to do stuff. So mixed age interaction is probably very healthy. There are probably additional benefits that come from mixed age interaction that aren't quite there in same age interaction. Although it's hard to say if what we have at the Child Study Center is same age, because developmental differences at a young age are great. And we have 30-month-olds and 60-month-olds. That's a sizable difference. You can't call that same age. Why don't you come up here, Kevin, because we're going to shift gears now and go into some of the things that we were talking about earlier. I wanted to make sure everybody had a copy, so let me just pass these out. I know some of you already have a copy, a list of questions.
If you have one.
Sorry.
Good morning, Sunshine. We have one, right? Thank you.
Rick, while Peter's passing those out, for those of you who gave me your CEU applications, they're spread out on the back table.